Annalee sat alone, picking over a piece of leftover pie in the kitchen, and wondering once again if she should have gone straight to Papa when she saw that the letter meant trouble for Teague. She'd been an hour on the floor beside the cook stove, watching the light from the lamp flicker on the honey-colored insides of the pie, periodically pulling her shawl closer as the heat from the embers in the stove failed, and telling herself not to interfere, that Teague would share the news as he willed. Annalee might have stayed there until the morning, when Mrs. Dow made her quarter-mile trek from her cottage to the main house to stir the embers to life and add a stick or two of wood for the breakfast fire. But she couldn't bear not knowing how to help him, so she berated herself for her nosiness, even as she climbed the stairs and stepped through the hall to his room. His door was open now, and the candle at his desk still burned, but he had gone. Checking both directions in the hall to assure herself he would not see her snooping, she picked up the offending letter from the desk. Headquarters Hoffman's Battalion, Depot Prisoners of War, near Sandusky, Ohio, December 30, 1863. Teague Scott, Newkirk, Ohio. Captain, it is with deepest sympathy that I inform you of the death of your brother. William Scott and 2 other men refused to stay within their permissible area, and at crossing past the warning stakes and approaching too near the camp perimeter, they were first accosted to halt and then fired upon. Your brother's wounds were too severe for successful treatment. His personal effects remain here at the prison until we receive your instructions regarding their shipment. Respectfully, B. W. Wells, Lieutenant and Post Adjutant. Annalee sat on the edge of his bed with her head in her hands. No wonder Teague thought God and all his angels were against him. That he should be given one hope and denied another within the same hour seemed too horrible for coincidence. She knew of nothing to say or do for him, but rose to stare out Teague's window for some kind of answer in the darkness. She saw there a light burning in the barn, hours after anyone was likely to be inside. And in this ill-fated atmosphere she didn't hesitate to drape her shawl up over her head and neck like a scarf while she ran downstairs, stopping only long enough to pull on her overcoat and call for Papa. As she'd expected, Teague wasn't in the barn, and neither was Benedict. She was already saddling Alice when Papa arrived at the door. "Teague's bolted," she explained without pretext. "His brother died, and now he's gone." "I'll check in town," Papa said, while she mounted the horse. "He may only want passage to the prison on the morning stage." Annalee nodded before she pressed Alice on, but she knew Papa was wrong. Teague had gone to the hill, the place where she had told him so long ago, when she had been sure of everything, that anyone could find peace. As Alice snorted her protest against running in this cold, as the horse's hooves sounded the hollowness under the bridge over the creek, as the grass underfoot crunched and broke off like shards of glass, Annalee envisioned and dreaded the kind of peace he could be seeking there. When she reined in at the foot of the hill and found Benedict pawing at the ground, those visions dissipated in her determination to be prepared for whatever she could meet at the summit. The ground was too hard and covered with ice for her to get a good foothold to climb, so for much of the ascent she held on to bushes and roots and to the dirt itself, frozen into solid muddy clumps to pull herself up. Her fingers were already numb from the quarter hour of riding, and as she stuck them into these icy handholds, they burned and sent an ache through her arms and into her neck and head. Teague must have determined something of profound importance would happen atop this hill for him to have endured the climb. But for all Annalee could see when she reached the top, there was no transfiguration, no divine revelation, but simply a parable, beauty in its starkness and solitude. The moon hung in its waxing phase, large enough to cast its white light on the bare crest of the hill where the ice changed the quality of the light and reflected it back blue into the sky. Teague stood in the midst of the spectral transfer, folding his arms against the cold and simply staring up into space. Annalee watched his breath hold shape in the air and drift into oblivion. His blue-tinged face remained fixed on the moon. At least Annalee assumed he was looking at the moon, for all but the brightest stars were effaced by its overwhelming glare. A perfect ring encompassed the elliptical light, a precursor to freezing rain tomorrow. Teague was crying. And though she knew he felt all things deeply, though she had seen his tears when he talked about the war, though she knew he must have wept countless times before, she had never imagined him heedless of the water threatening to freeze on his cheeks and unable to control the soft, deep moans that accompanied it. And though for nearly a year he had been confined almost exclusively to a woman's sphere, to her company, she had never imagined him so powerless. She watched him several minutes before the spasms of his shoulders slowed, and it occurred to her to approach him. She was in his shadow before he turned to face her, but his lack of surprise told her he had been aware of her presence for a long while. He wiped his eyes and nose with his hand, but didn't attempt to straighten himself or pull himself up to his full height, as did other people who were trying to regain control of themselves. He passed by her, bent over his cane to maintain his equilibrium on the ice, and looking like those blades of grass that broke under his every step.